Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm Britt. I make landscapes and environments, and today we are doing a bridge in the woods. I know it's been a second since I've done a step by step, but I am hoping to make some more for you guys. Before I start any process, I like to do a bit of reference gathering. So for this one, I have some bridges on my other monitor and some color schemes I wanted to play around with today. And I will talk more about the color schemes when we get to the painting. But there have been people asking about how I sketch. And I have two different ways I sketch. This one I do for myself, which is very loose and vague. It's more little notes I see for myself in shorthands that I know what I'm thinking, so I don't need to do too much detail unless it's something that I need to have a bit more detail with, like if it's a building, defining a bit more of the shapes, just so when I go into painting, I know how I'm thinking it to look. And then the other way I do sketching is a bit more cleaner. I tighten it up a bit, and that's for sending it off to somebody else, either for them to paint on if we're doing an animation background, or if it's just I'm also doing the painting, but it's for a client that they know what I'm thinking for each of these steps. So I don't have a strict method when it comes to sketching. Initially, I keep it loose. Even if I'm sending off to a client, the first step before I clean it up is just loose, just to finding the basic layout, getting the composition and the shapes down, and then going in and cleaning up what I need to clean up. I jump around between the background, middle ground, and foreground when sketching, just because that's just how my brain works. I can't focus on one section when sketching. Now, when painting, I like to do background to foreground, and that helps me control more in the painting process. Sketching doesn't matter. I'll jump around and think, oh, I want to put a rock here. Oh, I'm going to change this here. And it could be at any point. You'll see here I spent a little bit longer on the bridge because I do want it to be more of my focal point. And I do tend to spend more time on the focal point of a painting compared to other parts, just because that's what I want you to see the most. So I'm going to put more time into that section. But yeah, I didn't know what else to add, so. So we're going into the coloring process now. And as I mentioned earlier, the color scheme I want to do is more blues, greens, and oranges. Sort of complementary, but not fully. If you don't know what complementary means, it's just opposite colors on the color wheel. So blue and orange, red and green, yellow and purple. Those are complementary colors. They are good contrast colors, and they tend to help make stuff stand out. By adding the green, because just a bit more of another color. So I don't know the best way to explain it. I'm sorry. But I just wanted to play around with more of a limited color palette instead of using a lot of colors. So you'll see I was trying to decide on the sky color here because I wasn't sure how dark I wanted to make it, because I did want the forest to seem dense and with a lot of atmosphere, so it just goes on to the void forever. And then adding a bit of a lighter color in the center to kind of show a bit of light peeking through, but not too much, and keeping it focused around that bridge because I did want that to be the main focal point of this piece. So coming in here, I'm going to do the really far back trees being more silhouettes. So a little bit more of a darker blue, and just doing simple outlines of the tree trunks and the leaves, not doing too much detail because of the amount of distance they are between us and them. So a great way to add depth to a piece is one silhouettes and limiting the amount of detail and shading you do on objects that are more, what's the word? They're a bit farther away from us compared to objects closer to us. And once I have this all laid out, I am going to add a bit of an atmospheric layer to it. So just using a soft brush and color picking the sky and coming in, just adding a bit of that sky color to those back objects. It creates depth and adds a bit more of a foggy atmosphere to it, and helps push those trees back a bit more, because I'm going to use the same blue color on the next row of trees and do the same thing, but they're going to be less of that atmospheric color to kind of separate them from the back row trees to create a nice sense of tree depth to give more of a dense look to this forest. And I am going to add a bit of a light edge, so just taking a really small brush, taking a bit of a sky color, and just doing a nice outline of one side of the tree to kind of give it a little bit of shape to it so it's not completely flat. But that's as much detail as I'm putting on those trees in the very back row. And we're going to do the same thing on this back row patch of grass. Just doing a nice blue-green color in the very back. Minimum shading, and then adding some bushes to add a bit of greenery and plant life back there. So as of right now, I am just keeping it to the blues and not worrying too much about adding any extra color to it, because I want to show these are far away. Now the next row of trees we do after this, we're going to add a bit more of a green tree color, which is going to be the base tree color for all the trees. So I didn't want to do more of a brown color, just because I want to play around with color. But because of how they're set in the scene, they do have more red-brown tone to them, because they are a bit desaturated, if that's the right word. I guess not the right word. But how they lay with the other colors, they have more of a brown tone to them, but they don't inherently brown. They're green. I hope this is making sense. I'm trying to get better at explaining things. I'm not very good at it, but I'll get there. But because these are our first row of trees that have color, and I use those in quotations because everything has color, but they have a bit more depth to it, I'm going to do shading for these guys. So when I am shading anything, but these trees in particular, they have the base color, which is what it is filled in. Then I'm going to add a bit of a darker color, a lighter color, and then the sky color. I add the sky color to help it set in the scene, and it gives the object a bit more of a roundness. And I like using it if it's more in shadow, having the dark color and the sky color. It helps shade the object without using inherently light and dark. It gives it another what's a good word for that? Placement? Roundness? It just makes it feel like it belongs. I think that's a good way of phrasing it. And I do only have one brush I use for shading, which is this one. And I use it for a lot. I just like it has a nice texture to it, so when I'm shading either the grass before I put texture on it, or trees, or even water, it has a sense of movement when it comes to the water, and for the trees it kind of adds a bit of the bark texture without me putting my little lines that I like putting on the trees or bark. So once I have all the base shading done, I tend to add a bit of the sunlight color onto these trees. I'm not going to do it across the entire length of the tree, just in mostly the very top of the tree, where the sunlight will hit from the rays, to add a bit of a color change, I guess. But just to add a bit of that nice sun rays. And then we're going to come in and add some leaves. So keeping with the orange and the green color, kind of blending those two colors in and laying them in with this block-in brush. Wow, words are hard right now. This block-in brush, and then I'll add bit of texture and lighting on top of them with a leaf brush. And again, they are some distance away from us, so not going too crazy with detail, kind of keeping it to a minimum. And then building up the next row of trees, which are going to be slightly darker. And then the pass round, but continuing the trend of having the lighter color, darker color, and the sky color when blending. Now, because these are a bit closer, I'm going to go in and add a bit of tree bark lining. So I just add a bit of indication of bark. Not too crazy, just a bit of subtle detail, and adding a bit of a light color to the outside to give it a bit more divot indication, so like carvings and everything. Adding a bit of light to the other side. And then we're going to do some leaves. So these leaves are going to have a bit more saturation than the last row of leaves, but keeping with the greens and the oranges. Now I want to add a bit of the, I guess you would call it the leaf color light. Basically, when light shines through, you see a bit of the color of the leaves reflected on different surfaces. But because it's not so strong, I'm not going to be a strong orange on these trees, but just adding a bit of that sun rays there. I tend to forget about doing that sometimes, but I remember. And then adding a bit of atmosphere to some of these trees to kind of push them back, give them a bit of a foggy atmosphere. And then coming in with a light overlay layer using orange color and changing the layer to an overlay type and having a bit of the sun rays coming onto the bark and the tree trunk and playing around with that. So now we are going to do the river, and we're not, we're not going to do the full river and shape and everything just yet. I'm just going to block it in, and we're going to come back a bit later when I have the rest of the scene established for reflections and everything. But just have it in there and ready to go for when I come back. And then we're just going to jump to the front part of the area doing that ground, and I like using the lasso tool to come in and quickly select an area, fill it in, and transparency lock it, and just paint on top of it. Sorry, I have something stuck in my throat. So I'm going to do the bridge and the ground on 2 separate layers, just because I don't want to have to figure out if the entire bridge is covering the ground, or if I forget to select something because I didn't fully select it when I was doing the ground. But just have them as 2 separate ones, and I can have different selections for both, basically. So I want more of the ground closer to us to have that light hitting it, because the settings is going to be coming from the top left. And then the ground on the left hand side, we're going to have more of the blues on that to put it more into shadow. So I'm going to come in, here and put in a path. So just going to be using the lasso tool to kind of do an organic little pathway here. And I'm going to fill it in with a nice tan color. And I'm not too worried about shading this little guy, mainly because he's probably going to be covered up by a lot of the grass texture. Oh, we are going to go in and do the bridge now. So just quickly using lots of tools, select them, fill it with a red orange, and break it up each of the segments with the lasso tool and color and shade within it. Now this bottom part is going to have a bit of the white reflected on it, so we're going to have a bit of the blues. Now I wanted to have some brickwork detail here, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to do stone or get like where they're just like setting in with each other, or straight bricks. And then I decided on just using the brick brush I had and transforming it onto this bridge object, and I felt that was just a bit easier. And it got the result I was looking for, so it worked out in the end. But I set it to a multiply layer, and using my detail brush I usually use, going in just outlining some of it for the highlights and adding a bit of moss. Now we move on to the next row of trees, and the same as before, except these guys aren't gonna have leaves, they're just gonna be trunks. Now coming in with this plant brush, I've been using this as my grass texture brush, just going in and putting it in because it has a bit of a color jitter to it. So it will add a little bit more of the values of the color I'm picking to give it a bit more diversity of the colors of it around it, instead of just that color I'm picking. Hopefully that made sense. And I noticed that the bridge is a bit too saturated for this scene, so just putting a bit of the sky color on top of it, just lowering the opacity to help it set in the scene a bit more. And then we're gonna put some flowers in. I like having flowers, so why not? Most of the time it's just me going why not and putting it in, just to see what happens. I like doing these as experiments and playing around with different ideas and colors, just to have fun. These sketches are typically kind of like warm-up sketches in a way, just to get ideas out. Most of the time, my final, or the ones I take a long time on, are the Blender to Photoshop ones, which I haven't done in a while. I really want to do another one. I just haven't thought of an idea for that yet. But I will, one day. And I know I promised a Blender tutorial, and as soon as I come up with an idea, I will be doing that. But back to the point of these, they're just basically colored sketches. And they typically take between 1 to 2.5 hours, depending on how motivated I am. Sometimes they take a bit longer, depending if I'm distracted or if Squeedo likes to lay on my tablet while I'm drawing. So, just to get my brain woken up and get started for the day. And now we're going to do the frontmost trees. So these are going to be the darkest of our scene. And I'm not going to put a lot of the lighter color on this. It's mainly going to be a darker color, the base color, and the sky color. And that'll help it stay in shadow. The only time I'm going to have a bit of the lighter color on it is when I have the orange casting down from the leaves and a bit of the light overlay layer on it. So I'm going to add a bit more shading to this path here, just because it feels underdeveloped compared to the others. Just adding a bit more darker colors to it. And then I'm going to come in and put a nice brown shadow, all brown multiply layer across these to kind of put more of this into shadow and really emphasize the lighting here. So using brown as my multiply layer and a bit of a yellow as an overlay layer to kind of help sculpt and bring these lights and shadows to life. So now we're going to the really fun part, which is lighting. Not lighting, it's a river. So when I'm doing water, I am just taking a bit of the lighter of the base color and the darker the base color. And then I'm going to add a bit of green if most of the greenery is green, to kind of add a bit more colors to the river, so it's not all one value, not value, multiple values of the same type of hue. It's going to be different, so more of the greens and the blues. And then when we do a bit of shine, and this is something I do with water or anything that's reflective, is how I do shine, which is I take my blending brush, a bit of the brown, and I hold shift to get these nice perfect straight lines, and I put it on a color dodge so it shines, and I erase some of the edges to kind of give it more of a sparkling feeling to it. That's just a stylistic choice I choose to do with water. But then I'll add a reflective layer where I add a bit of the colors that are around it, and just add a bit coming into the water here, and then erasing a bit of the edge so it kind of fades out. Lower the opacity on it so it's subtle, and then I occasionally add lily pads, but it depends on the scene. This one I did, so I don't. And then I add something called a water break, so when water hits the edge it's a bit lighter, so adding that helps define the movement of the water. And adds a bit of light to it. And then we're going to come in with a light over. Well, this one's going to be a hard light, so it actually shows up, because I want that orange color to show. And just having it streaking across. And all I'm doing is just going in and touching up different scenes, different parts of it, adding a bit of light here, increasing the shadows, defining certain edges, just making sure it looks as close to final as possible. I'm not too worried about looking as final, if that makes sense. But I like having a blur layer. So what I do, and I don't do this often, but I will select everything, duplicate it, collapse it, and do something called a blur layer. So I do it more with like foggy type of stuff, and just blur the background a bit, kind of focusing on the focal point. And I do something called an exposure layer, which is the same thing, except it helps lighten lights and help push values. And I do it all with layer maps, which help keep certain areas. Sorry, I blanked out for a second. Basically, you're playing with black and white and grays with layer masks. So black it does not exist. White is where it fully exists, and gray is the values in between when it comes to layer masks. It's the best way I can think to describe it. But layer masks help you control different areas, and it helps you not worry about it being destructive, so you can easily fix it and it's not permanent. I think that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if that makes sense. If anything I'm saying makes sense to you guys. But that's basically how I do landscapes. It's just taking it step by step, working foreground to back, background to foreground and not worrying about it too much. Art's supposed to be fun, so I try to have fun with it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I appreciate all you guys' support. I genuinely mean that. I did not think I would have as many people following as I did. I didn't even think I was going to hit 100. I was just doing this on my own, goofing off, just trying to practice art skills, and 1,400 of you decided to come along with the journey. Thank you. It truly means a lot. And I am hoping to make more of these talk-throughs, hopefully with better explanations of how I do stuff and how I work through different problems. I'm definitely improving on trying to improve on explaining how I do stuff a bit better. Not really used to doing that, so hopefully this gets better. I just want to say thank you. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Have a wonderful day and take care. Bye.